Welcome back to Pass the Torch, Legacies in Jewelry. My name is Naja Dessa Van Diest, and this specific episode is one that I have been looking forward to sharing with you since the genesis of this podcast. It is my utter delight to welcome on today Shelly Sergent, who is the most savvy, wonderful curator in the business. I adore her with my whole heart. She is the face behind Somewhere in the Rainbow collection. I can't wait for you to meet her. I don't even want to spoil too much. Let me just go ahead and introduce you to her. Here is Shelly Sergent. Shelly Sergent, thank you so much for coming on Pass the Torch, Legacies in Jewelry. I have been elated to have you on. As long as we've had this on the books, I've just been counting down the hours. So thank you so much for joining me.
Well, first off, thank you for the invitation. That's most important. I love the concept of what you're doing and the oral histories that you are capturing for all time. And I think that it's brilliant and it's smart. And your invitation to me was lovely, and it was so beautifully done that I just who says no to that?
Yeah, for those who didn't see it, I showed a few people in my circle, but I did actually a little watercolor of Shelly in the rainbow with gems above her head, and I sent it to her.
I wish that I had it here. I'm actually at my home office today, and your beautiful card is at the Somewhere in the Rainbow offices, but I wish that I had it here because it's so pretty and it was so thoughtful. I think that's what got me most of all is that it was a very thoughtful gesture that came with a couple of different causes, but the invitation was so perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you for accepting and coming on. I have, known you for a few years now, and it's just been so great to now get to connect with you on this platform. So we do know each other, but now I get to know you a little bit better through this conversation. So
yeah,
do you mind
you might learn things that you never wanted to know.
Shelly, I want to know all the things. How did you first fall in love with gemstones and jewelry? I know right now that you're a curator, but you have been in gems and jewelry long before this Somewhere in the Rainbow position. So can you talk to me about how you even entered the field?
Yeah, I'll celebrate my 43rd. I'll celebrate my 43rd Christmas in the industry this year in 2025. Holy moly, that's a long time. But yeah, I started I lived in a little town called Carbondale, Colorado, just on the western slope from where you are, right in between Glenwood Springs and Aspen. There's this little hidden gem of a city. It was actually a town then. And my mother had a friend that ran our local Zales Jewelry store in Glenwood Springs. So I had to drive about 15 miles, I think, to get to Glenwood Springs. And she said, so I need a gift wrapper for Christmas. And I thought that Shelly might be interested in doing gift wrapping and cleaning glass. Those were the only two things that I was allowed to do. And I thought, well, all the cute boys hang out at the mall, and I loved. I even as a young high schooler, I loved getting dressed. So I got to get dressed to go to work, and I had a reason to buy heels. And at that time, every woman in the Zale Corporation had to wear hose, and we had to be dressed in a dress, and whatever. So times have changed, but then that's what it was. So even just to gift wrap, I got to get dressed to go to work, and I loved that. But what I saw when I was a young Shelly was people would come in and they would take a lot of time to choose a very special gift. And they would put a lot of thought process into it. And then they would drop a large sum of money or credit on a credit card. And then they would thank that person on their way out the door. And inevitably, the recipient would come back and would need a sizing or just to say thank you or, just to show the store manager that they loved their gift. And it was a relationship. And I think that I fell in love with the relationship building and the excitement and the thoughtful gift giving before I actually fell in love with the gems or the jewelry. So, and that was such an interesting time because there were no cell phones, there weren't any, there weren't computers, we weren't emailing each other. We had a point of sale, cash register still at the time. And we were just starting to unroll technology to keep track of inventories and profit and loss statements and all of those things. So anyway, after 6 weeks, I was supposed to be done in January, and I said to the manager, I just have loved this. I've had so much fun. And she said, how would you like to learn to change watch batteries? And I thought, okay, why not? How would you like to learn how to clean jewelry instead of just glass? I'm like, okay, let's do that. And so it just became my part-time job through high school. And I was 16 at the time, and I just had a great time. By the time I graduated high school, I had taken every possible course that the Zale Corporation offered for training. I had entered GIA to do my diamonds, which at the time, the Zale family still owned Zales. So they offered, they offered to pay for all of those classes for people who had been there for, longer than a year, whatever. There were all different kinds of criteria. But at that time, I entered GIA and I did my diamond program, and then I found my way into management. At the time, I had left, they had moved me, and I had found myself in Arizona, and I took over my first Zales store as manager when I was 19. And at that time in the company, I was the youngest manager to ever be promoted from a salesperson and an associate to a management position. And they gave me an underperforming store and one that was just struggling, and I still had brown shag carpet in the store, and my displays were worn and gray and whatever. But I remember going in there, and it was such a lovely group of people. Most of all of them older than me, with the exception of one part-timer, and they thought, we're not going to take direction from this little tiny person with a very big mouth. And yet somehow I won them over, and the store started performing, and I think that they just were looking for somebody to come in and tell them that, yes, we're in an awful mall and it's not the greatest scenario of the world, but we have an opportunity to meet with people and to make that relationship and to make the connection. And jewelry will be the way that we get there. And it happened. It just happened. So I learned my first 3 words that I carried with me through all of my management career, which were focused, driven, and motivated. And those 3 words changed the way that I approached jewelry, staff, and clients. For whatever reason, for me, it worked, and I loved it. I loved managing, and then I went into middle management, and then from middle management into some corporate management, and then the whole Zale world changed. Right, the family sold the company to People's Jewelers of Canada, and that was a change that just didn't agree with me and my philosophies. I felt like we were losing contact with the client. I think that our jewelry changed. Our quality of jewelry changed, and lots of other things. Yeah, so that's how it all began, was as gift wrapping and cleaning glass and becoming this young manager that nobody wanted to listen to. But I will say this, there was somebody there that was younger than I was. She was 17 years old. Her name was Laura, and Laura today is still one of my dearest friends.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so that relationship has transcended time. She's been out of the jewelry industry for decades. She's now in the school system, but that relationship was established at a very young age, and it has continued to grow, and we are continuing to be like sisters.
You're just so good with people. You're also now imparting what you know to other people through the work of your curation, but also you're an amazing storyteller. What values and philosophies guide the way you approach your work?
I mean, the value system is very easy. That's a very easy. You can ruin your career in one heartbeat in this industry by not having and upholding the values of the industry, which is a handshake is your word. As soon as you say yes, yes means yes. Maybe means I'm working on it or I'm thinking about it, and no means no, or I'll pass or whatever. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about curating a collection like I do, or if you're just having, if you're making business with somebody, right? So I think that the value part of that is a very easy answer, and that is you always hold your word true. And you always are fair with someone. In my curation worlds, um, maybe somebody will come to me with a gemstone, for example, and they might be offering me a beautiful sapphire for $25,000 per carat. And I'm going to look at and I'm going to look at market, I'm going to look at origin, I'm going to look at all of the different factors that I have to look at. But at the end of the day, I might go back and say to them, number one, I think that you're asking too little for the stone based on this. Sometimes I'm going to go back and say, I think you're asking too much for the stone based on these reasons. But my value is always my word. And having people trust you because they know that your word is good, because you believe in your product, you believe in the mission, you believe in the relationships, you believe that Mother Nature is giving us her absolute best that she can. And when you believe all of those things, it translates. It translates to the other person. And that person now feels safe and they feel confident and they feel like you are giving your best. So that part of your question is easy. So I always bring my value to any relationship that I'm having, rather that just be having a conversation like this or sitting over the table with millions of dollars of stones, that somebody has trusted me and given me the opportunity to sit with them and to talk about their hard work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the value side. What was the other part of the question? Tell me that again.
Or philosophy.
Same philosophy. I think my philosophies and my values are very much the same. Listen, understand, appreciate, be transparent, be real, and know that your handshake or your word is putting your hand on the Bible. It's all
Ironclad.
the same.
And that is truly what you're known for. I know a lot of people who have had the privilege to work with you, and everyone's just like, oh, Shelly's the best.
That's so nice. There are a few out there that don't think I'm the best. That's for darn
No,
sure.
you are. You
But
are. No.
but I think I think that anybody who knows me would definitely say that I'm fair. I don't always give the answer that somebody's looking for, maybe, but I would like to think that everybody who has done business with us finds me in particular, because I am the face, to be transparent and honest and to hold to my word.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about that, because you have probably one of the most unique jobs in the world, dare I say. Can you tell anyone who's brand new to this conversation what the Somewhere in the Rainbow curation is and what your role is with that company?
Yeah, so Somewhere in the Rainbow is an actively growing, privately owned gem and jewelry collection. Our focus is on modern art and modern artists of our time, knowing and understanding the ancient ways and going back to the ways that jewelry has been created in order to get to a contemporary, and from contemporary now into a modern time zone or art zone. Is very important to us. So we do feature works from the Edwardian period, the Art Deco period, the Victorian period. So we do have those works, but our focus is modern artists. And we have a very strong focus in American modern artists, people such as Henry Junet and the Eddie Sakamotos and the Susan Helmich and Scott Keatings. And I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But we are drawn to telling this generation's story. The Art Deco story's been told, and the Edwardian period and the Victorian, right? All of those stories have been told. And now we're living in this story that is is still unfolding and is being told in the present time. And so I love being a storyteller for them, for their work. And then the same is true of lapidary arts. We can go back to through Southeast Asia and through Brazil and even through Africa, Germany, of ancient ways of cutting gemstones. But there is a whole active community right here in the United States of modern gem artists and an understanding of current minerals and all of those things. So I'm totally getting off topic here, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and something that I love sharing the story. But somewhere in the rainbow began when I was working in retail. I was working at a retail store here in Phoenix, Arizona. So somewhere in the rainbow, bases in Scottsdale, and I was working for a store in Phoenix. And a gentleman came in to buy a sapphire for his wife for her birthday, and I showed him a heated and a non-heated stone, and he said, I don't understand, why is the price so different between these two stones? And so we talked about the rarity factor of the no heat stone versus the heated sapphire and why that happens. And right, so we went through a very tiny gemology lesson in those few moments. And in the end, he chose the no heat sapphire, and we put it into a beautiful ring, and out the door he went. And he called me a couple of weeks later, and he said, this was so interesting to me, being a man of science. Give me another gemstone and let me study a gemstone. And so I knew through our course of conversation, I knew that his daughter was going to become engaged to a gentleman from Russia. And so I gave him alexandrite to study alexandrite. And that was really fascinating to him. And he called me back and he said, I love this. My wife and I would like to see some alexandrite. And so instead of just memoing stones, which anybody that might not be familiar with that, I would call a dealer, and they would, on my word, going back to the value system, right? They would send me some gemstones and a piece of paper, and I would sign off on that piece of paper that if I sold one, they got paid, and if I didn't sell one, they would take them all back. But I didn't want to do that this time. There was something about the response from this man that made me want to give him more. So I called a dealer of mine, a friend of mine, Evan Kaplan in California, who worked with Omi Gems at the time. And I said, Evan, instead of just sending stones to me, I'd like you to come and I'd like you to give this couple an experience with alexandrite. And anybody who knows the retail world knows that you never call your wholesaler and put him in front of your retail client, because that's just not done. And I knew that I was breaking every rule, but I have a tendency to be a little bit of a rule breaker and bender anyway, so why not? And it was fascinating. It was a fascinating day of watching these people take in the knowledge that Evan was giving them, and to hear the history of alexandrite and where it was found and how it was found and why does it color change and why the mystery of the stone. And some mysteries we don't want to know why, right? Some mysteries are meant to be just mysteries. And so we took the stones. Of course, we live in Arizona. We have 300 and some odd days of sunshine a year. Thankfully, that day was one of them. So we took the stones outside and we looked at them in natural lighting. And then we brought them back in and we looked at them under different lighting sources. And they were amazed at what they were seeing. And at the end of the day, there was a 10.5 carat alexandrite on the table.
Wow.
There was a 465 with a 98% color change. And they love tanzanite. They have another daughter who loves tanzanite. And so Evan had brought some tanzanite along as well. So there was a 15 karat tanzanite along with these two alexandrites. And I thought, I'm going to get fired. That's what's going to happen, because even I, as a veteran in the business, I had no idea how much money was laying on the table with that 10 karat alexandrite.
Totally.
I had never seen one. I literally got chills and got teary when it was taken out of its pouch. And we were told, Evan said to us when he took it out of his magic pouch, he said, so it's not for sale. I'm taking it to the Middle East and I'm showing it. I'll be showing it in the Middle East. And so the owner said, well, I don't think it's going to the Middle East. I think it's going to stay right here. And you can't show it to us and tell us it's not for sale. So anyway, it was really fun. And at the end of the day, there was, $400,000+ sitting on the table. And these are people who had been clients of the store for a very long time, but they had never spent a significant sum of money. And in this store, that would have been, say, 40,000 plus in a single purchase or on a single
Right.
item. And so for them, this was a major investment of their time and their money and resources. And I remember him saying at the end of our meeting, "Can I wire the money next week?" And
Wow.
I said, before I could even think about it, I'd rather you bring it in $100 bills so we can play in it. And everybody got a good laugh. Of course, he wired the money, but it was really it was so much fun. And it was fun watching them. It was fun
Yeah.
listening to their questions, right? And so after that, he called me again and he said, "That was so fun. We really enjoyed that. Give me another gemstone and let me study it." And so
Cool.
Alexandrite had ended pretty well, so I gave him Podparaja sapphire.
Nice.
And their next purchase ended up being a 9.5 carat, a 936 Podparaja sapphire, which is on exhibit in Harvard right now. It's at the Harvard Museum right now. So the collection just kind of began like that. They were a couple who knew nothing about gemstones other than, they had a couple of stones, but they loved jewelry.
Yeah.
They both remember going with their parents and their grandparents to the local jewelry stores in Philadelphia and here in town. She's from here. And they both remember fondly, the exact experiences that I was having at Zales as a 16-year-old, which was giving a thoughtful gift, saving their grandparents and his mother saving her grocery money and saving, pennies, and pennies turned to dollars until they had enough to be able to go to the jewelry store and turn that money into something that was very special. And they still have these heirloom pieces from their grandparents and their parents in their collection today. So even though they didn't understand or know jewelry, they knew that it created a moment.
Hmm.
And I loved watching that part of their story unfold. They couldn't have told you the difference then between a Savarite garnet and an emerald, and yet today they can tell you the difference. They've never been to a GIA course, but they've been quick studies. They've learned it.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
And
that
they
was,
made a fantastic decision in trusting you to guide them.
well, thank you. I think he would disagree with you often because I cost him a lot of money. But I think that their mission is being fulfilled. So that all happened in 2008. And in 2011, they decided that they really wanted to take this collection and to do something a little different with it. And so we exited the whole retail world of everything and became a privately held LLC. The name Somewhere in the Rainbow came from knowing that we had to identify what this collection was going to be. And I came up with 6 or 7 names, and the owner looked and said, "If we're going to do colored gemstones, all of the colors will be found in the rainbow." And so that's how we became known as Somewhere in the Rainbow. And I loved it. I loved it from the very moment that she said it, because it really does encompass what their mission is. And their mission is education. Using their collection, which is now over 3,200 pieces deep. And I can say that collectively we have collected and curated at least 95% of those stones together, right? Sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree and sometimes we say no, but yeah, about 3,200 stones have been curated since 2008.
That is so
So
fascinating.
what do we do with it? What do we do with the collection, right? And so then that probably goes into your next question.
Well, I was just curious, what does the curatorial process look like? How do you decide what belongs in the collection and what doesn't?
So we have a mission statement, and the mission statement is to use the collection as an educational tool within the jewelry industry, whether
Mm.
that be through museums, galleries, retailers, guilds, which is where you and I last saw one another, was speaking to the American Gem Society Guild, the Gemological Institute of America, and the Women's Jewelry Association, right? So those 3 associations that bring groups together that want to continue to learn, and they want to continue their own education to share with colleagues, with editorial, with their clients at their stores. And so we didn't really know how that process was going to work, but our mission statement was to share the collection with these organizations that were interested in learning and in preserving these beautiful, beautiful things that Mother Nature gives to us. And my philosophy from the very beginning has always been the same. Mother Nature gives us rocks, lapidarists give us gems, and designers and goldsmiths give us heirlooms. And
Yeah.
you can't have one without the other. They can't find their way to a museum for preservation and education without all of those other steps being in place. And so it's a beautiful collaboration between Mother Nature and man, and how man interprets what Mother Nature has given to them.
It's beautifully
So,
said. That's actually one of the main prominent things that I saw when I first came in contact and actually got to see a bit of the Somewhere in the Rainbow collection, was that you had both raw material and finished pieces. That is very unique.
yeah, I think, if we had to break it down, I would say 70% of the collection is loose, 30% of the
Mm.
collection is set. We work with all different kinds of artists and ages. We have cutters that cut stones for us when they were 12. And now they're in their 20s and we're still collecting their work. And pretty soon they're going to be in their 30s, and I hope we're still collecting their work. But and again, that's a whole educational component all in itself, right? The evolution of watching an artist from a very young artist, and as they mature and as they age and as they hone their skill, and sometimes they change their style completely, but to watch how that all of those transitions lay out. I can tell, for example, Nick Alexander, he's a gem cutter. I can tell Nick's story by just taking gemstones from his out of his box starting at age 12 and now well into his 20s. And I don't even have to have anything other than his name and a beginning year and an end year, and you can see the evolution of his work. And so the storytelling part is a really important part, I think, of what Somewhere in the Rainbow does.
Are there any specific acquisitions or collaborations that stand out to you as especially meaningful during your time at Somewhere in the Rainbow?
There are more than you and I could talk about in a whole day. I can't think. There was a woman by the name of Loretta Cooper. Loretta Cooper was the deputy director of the Smithsonian. And one day she was in my office, and she and Dr. Jeff Post, who is the retired curator of the Smithsonian Natural History Museum collection, were going through the collection, and she said to me, I see all of this. I see what you've done, but who are you? Who is Somewhere in the Rainbow? And it took me a long time, I'm going to say a year and a half, before I was able to say, I have an answer. And we were announcing the opening of the museum in Tucson. I was on stage at the Philanthropy Planetarium with Eric Fritz. And we were announcing that this beautiful museum was going to be happening. And Loretta sadly wasn't in the audience, but I said out loud, Loretta, I can answer your question. Somewhere in the Rainbow is a community. We're a community of collaborations. We are the place where people come to deposit their best works. And it is through the collaboration of, again, Mother Nature first, but then we have to have a miner. And that miner has to be willing to take the risk and to take the gamble and to have, no manicured nails, and to work so hard to extract these beautiful gifts and then to bring them to market, and knowing that maybe they've worked for 2 years to bring a handful of pebbles to market to be able to sell. And that's their life's work for months, sometimes years, right? So we have to remember that. And so there's that beginning part of that collaboration is between Mother Nature and the miner, and then the miner and the cutter who has to look inside of the rough and determine, is it better left as a mineral, or is that juicy little piece in there that's waiting to be discovered and to be brought forth, right? And sometimes they're successful in that, and sometimes they're not. And so then there's that collaboration between now the miner and the gem cutter. And then the cutter produces these beautiful stones, and they put them out into the world for waiting for a designer or a design house or somebody to find them and for them to speak to the artist. And then the artist takes them and creates something magical.
Mm.
And so we are a community of collaborations from Mother Earth all the way through to editorial and museums and lapidaries and designers and goldsmiths and finishers who fingers, they don't even have a fingerprint anymore because that's what they do. They work so hard. And so we are that place. We are that community where it all comes together, and no one is vying for space, right? Nobody's looking to go into a store and say, my line is so important, I deserve 6 feet of your showcase space. People are coming here to share their work because they know that the mission is to use it to further the education of their work, rather it be the mining, the gem cutting, the polishing, the designing, the finishing, whatever it is, the editorials, the photography, the labs. We work very closely with the laboratories because the science side is very important. And so I don't think that we set out to start to ensure that we touch on every facet of the industry, but that's where I think we've been allowed to come and people have embraced us. And we weren't embraced in the beginning. People had no idea who the hell we were and what we were about. And they didn't necessarily trust us. They didn't necessarily trust the process, which, jewelers and miners are, they're kind of a cagey group anyway. There's definitely a lot of superstition and, all of those things. So anyway, I guess when I think about who we are a community of collaborations. And if you told me I have to give one, I think the most significant one is we have a beautiful 15-karat Paraíba tourmaline necklace. It's beautiful. Literally, it's like looking inside of a glacier. And that's exactly what the owner said when she saw it the first time. She said, it's like walking inside of a glacier. And we were sitting in a dark room and it just lit up. The entire room was just glowing blue. And we acquired that piece in 2009. And I didn't showcase it until Tucson in 2012. And a young man came to our booth, and he was walking down the aisle, and he was completely focused on this blue piece of kryptonite from our showcase. And he was very well dressed and a very handsome young Japanese gentleman. He was very patient, and he said, "May I inquire of your Paraíba?" And I said, "Sure, of course." And he said, "Could I ask when did you acquire it?" And I said, "Oh, we acquired it in 2009." And he said, "Yes, it left our country in 2008. And I never thought I would see it again." And now my curiosity is completely piqued. And I said, "Could I take it out of the showcase for you?" And when I looked up, he was very misty and he had tears. And he said, would you take it out?" And when I saw him reach for it, it was like a father reaching for a newborn child. It was with such care and with such focus and such intensity. Or such intention, I should say. It wasn't even so intense. It was very intentional. And he began to cry and he said, "Could I ask, did it come with what you and your country call a certificate?" And I said, "No, it came with a full PhD report, but none of us could read it because it was written in Japanese." I said, "But we all understood the color chart and the copper chart, and it was completely off the charts." And he said, "Yes, what you have is the work of my father." And he said, "I wasn't scheduled to come to Tucson this year, but I had a client who called me at the last moment, and my father recently died. And this was the favorite stone of my father's that ever came through our lab in Japan. And I believe that my father brought me to this day to tell me that I'm doing the right thing by taking over his life's work." And there was not a dry eye in our booth. Everyone was sharing his moment and his emotion and his confirmation that he was on the right path. And now he is a well-respected scientist from every aspect of the gem world. But to watch him go from being a very unsure young man to being such a prominent figure in the science world today has been such a joy to watch. And then he said to me, "Can I come back?" I was like, "Yeah, you can come back as often as you want." And he left and he came back with a booklet that's, about this big and it's very thin. And on the back cover was the 15-karat Paraíba when it was loose before it was set. And the next year, when Masaki came back again, he brought photos of the rough. He brought photos of the mine owner Hitor holding the crystal that actually cut our stone. And so that moment, that collaborative moment that happened not at all by accident, created this beautiful collaboration that we now know everything about the stone. And
Wow.
it created a relationship that is still today one of my favorite relationships that we have, although I only see Misaki one time a year.
Yeah. Yeah. How tender.
It was. It
I
was a
love that.
tender, tender moment for sure.
Well, you and I both know that jewelry often carries such a deep personal and cultural meaning for the people who own it and have it and share it and wear it. You have a rare vantage point of both the high jewelry world and the gem trade. What do you think each side should grow to understand about the other?
That you can't have one without the other. One can't exist without the other. You can carry a loose gemstone around in your pocket and you can have it forever, but if it only stays in your pocket, it's meant to bring you joy, but is that its purpose? Or are you a steward as a gem dealer, as a trade person? Are you meant to be a steward of that stone until it goes on to find its forever home? And sometimes I think that that stone is meant to be with you for a period of time. Maybe it's bringing confidence, maybe it's bringing healing, maybe it just has to speak to you to be willing to let it go. But and for a designer and for the jewelry trade, you can't create your designs and you can't tell your story and share your voice without the gemstones. You can if you just do gold work, but you know, even at somewhere in the rainbow, we call diamonds accent stones. But even as a diamond person, I guess you could tell your story that way. But for speaking from the colored gemstone industry and from a gem trade industry, I think that gem people and artists need to understand that they need one another. The story's complete for the end user, for the end consumer, for the collector, for the mother, the daughter, the grandfather, the baby, whoever it is that's receiving that gift, their stories are better together. I think that everybody has a responsibility of education. I think that our gem trade should be educating the retail buyer at gem shows. I think the retail buyers should be educating their staff. And I think that they should be empowering their staff to share that educational component. I think that designers and people who are at the bench should share the details of how they created something, you know, and that's hard to do in a general public format with a jewelry store that might carry bigger brands and not have that one-on-one connection. But every time I am in a store and I'm talking to either guild members or I'm talking to the store's clients or I'm talking to the store owner, my message is always the same of you have to have a relationship with a designer. You can carry all of the big brands that you want, but I think even the big brands have a responsibility to educate. If you mass manufacture, you have a responsibility. If you make a one-off design, you have a responsibility. And I think that that's a game changer for everyone. I think
Yeah.
education, I think, is what we could all be doing better.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I got the privilege to be educated by you a couple years ago. You came to Beyondy Jewelers and you did a whole evening course on modern masters. And that was my first exposure to even that concept and just that thought process of identifying who's doing this type of work now in this point in time. And so I kind of just wanted to ask you, what do you think the role of storytelling and the way that storytelling has evolved in the jewelry trade over the years impacts how we even interact with our jewelry?
I actually think we're doing a better job of storytelling. I think that people are realizing that the connection to jewelry is in the story.
Correct. Absolutely.
And, you know, when I was selling jewelry when I was 18 years old and managing stores when I was 19 years old, I wanted to hear my client's story. I wanted to hear why they were shopping. Was it a birthday or an anniversary or what was the purpose? But I didn't think then about telling them the story of a gemstone, the story of how a piece of jewelry was made. It was just there. It was in the showcase, right? So They saw it, they liked it, they wanted that one, they paid for it, and out the door they went. I may have given them the, the 4 Cs of diamonds, or, that sapphires come in lots of colors or whatever, but I never really understood the story until I went to work for a design house. That the story was the jewelry. The story was the artist. And without the client connecting to the artist, there wasn't really a story to tell, right? And so they came there looking for his story. They wanted a piece of his artistry, his vision, what he saw when he looked at that spinel or that alexandrite or that tourmaline or whatever the case was. And so I think that's when it finally hit me that telling the story was as important as asking for the story.
What story would you like to tell young and emerging jewelers like myself?
Find your voice. Don't find somebody else's voice. Find yours. Find your style. Learn from the people that you admire. Ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid to approach the Susan Helmiches of the world. Don't hide. Find your voice. Find your style, and don't ever waver from it. Don't follow trends. Trends will come and trends will go. If you are a lover of Etruscan, heavy Byzantine granulation, I think of Jack and Lizzie, who own a company called Zafiro.
Yes.
They blow me away. I love Jack and Lizzie, not only as people, but the fact that they have stayed true to the art form of ancient granulation. Who does that? Nobody. Nobody does this work anymore. My gosh, when you see it, when you hear their story and how it's created, and you understand the hundreds of hours that go into it, they found their voice. They stay true to their story. They don't want to be somebody else. They just want to be Zafiro. And I think that is the best advice that I could give anyone, whether you're a cutter, a designer, polisher, a finisher, whatever you do, find your way and don't let anyone tell you that your way's not right. If it works for you, it works for you. And eventually your voice will be heard and your style will be recognized, and the sky is the limit. Now, the other thing that I will tell you, I actually asked this question. I asked this question when I did a panel discussion in Tucson with some of our modern artists this year in 2025. And Vic Valian actually was the first one to answer the question. And he said, get the deposit. So
Also a great answer.
I guess I'll follow up with Vic and Zoltan David, who both said, yeah, get the deposit. But no, I think that finding your voice and being true to who you are as an artist and not following trends. And I think that the same is this. I think it's the same if I'm giving advice to a young collector. People ask me all the time, how do you start a collection? Start with your favorite color. Right? If your favorite color is purple and purple sapphire is not in your budget, amethyst probably is. When you connect to something that you love and you are invested in it, then it's going to be successful.
I feel really lucky right now. I'm in a place where I am giving myself the breathing room to play and figure out what that looks like for me. So I have a great privilege to study under some fantastic people, but I've had this conversation with them directly. I don't want to just copy what they've done.
Sure.
I want to learn from them and then take it and work it enough where it then feels like my own, and I have this deep connection and love for it because it is uniquely my own.
Yeah, I love that. I love all of that.
That's a
And
work in
again,
progress right now.
that's finding your voice. We're all a work in progress. Are you kidding? I've been doing this for 43 years. I'm still a work in progress. Some people would like me to progress a little faster in learning and following the rules. I'm not really good at that. But no, I think that being a work in progress is something that we should always strive to be. If we ever think that we have all the answers, we've done it wrong. I think that the best philosophers in life know that they might have a philosophy, but it's constantly evolving. The one thing that we're always guaranteed is change. So yeah, I love that you're still a work in progress. I love that you're still learning and growing and finding your voice. Earlier, we were talking about a young artist who I admire greatly, Nolan Sponsler. And I remember when Nolan was just beginning and when he was just learning gem cutting. He did gem cutting long before jewelry making, and I'll let you and he tell his story when that time comes. I mention him because he struggled a little bit in the beginning to find his style, his voice,
Mm,
and he learned from some great masters, from Hashnu and from Hargrave, and he really poured so much time and energy and resources into bettering himself, and he's still doing it now. And I love that, he's still buying new tools and inventing new tools, living up to his failures and his successes and the trials and the triumphs and all of that, right? So I love that about him, but I love the fact that he recognized that he was working stone, but he was working it in someone else's voice until he found his path to find his own. And now his voice is strong and it's independent and it is absolutely Nolan and it doesn't belong to anyone else.
yeah. So awesome. And you can tell when I see a piece of his, I can tell that it is
Yeah,
his,
yeah.
which is the coolest thing and the dream of mine. I want to have a hand like that where someone can see it and
And you will.
eventually
You
recognize
will.
it. Yeah. I'm working on
I
it.
was having a conversation in Pittsburgh recently with a young woman who is sitting in this place of her career that she's thinking she might want to transition a little bit. And I said to her, and I'll say to you, why not me? Ask
Yeah.
yourself that question every day. Why not me? Of course you can. Why not?
Well, and I also love the sentiment that just because something has been done before, like people have had jewelry brands before, it's not a unique thing, but I haven't done it yet. And because I am, a unique person, I will bring my own flavor to it. So I look forward to exploring that.
Yeah, yeah, your voice. You'll find your voice. You'll find your methods. You'll find your way that says, "This is my brand. I'm putting my name on it because I love it, because it's who I am." So good for you. I support you and send you all of the light that I can in telling you that I'm happy to help anytime, any way that I can, because
Thank you, Shelly.
our next generation is critical. And the generation after that will become critical. And we talked earlier a little bit about how the industry is changing, right? We talked about wax carvers and the fact that finding people who carve beautiful waxwork that can actually be cast and set, it's a dying art because now we have CAD. And CAD is now being challenged somewhat by AI. And where do we go after AI? It's hard to say. We don't know what that looks like yet, but you'll still be here when that story is being written, and so will your whole generation. I am a firm believer that you never leave. You always embrace those who have come before you, the tools, the techniques, the theories, the
Yeah.
trials, the things that work, the things that don't. There's so much to be learned from that. So I think that the past tells a very contemporary story leading to the present. And I think it will always be contemporary. I don't think it will ever be history. It might be historical, but I think that it's still being lived and practiced on a daily basis in our industry and in 100 industries like ours. Although ours is so unique, our industry is so unique because of the connection between human and Mother Nature
Yeah.
and then to an end consumer and all of that. But I just believe that as you grow as artists, any type of artist in our industry grows to hold on to some of the past, but to take it forward in a modern way, in a contemporary way, is the way through the future.
Right. Well, and I think you bring up such an interesting point because me personally, I've never felt challenged or like I won't have a job because of CAD. Because what interests me is fabrication, that's been the same relative to like pneumatic tools and lasers for like the last 200 years. My tools can literally be that old. And there's always going to be someone who wants something that special.
Hmm.
And as long as there's that hand to hand connection and that heart to heart connection, there will always be a market for it. And I think that, commercial jewelry is so divided from what I hope to do eventually that let them.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that sentiment that you just said, the hand to hand and the heart to heart, because that is a very different story that's being told there as opposed to a manufactured commercial jewelry line. And again, it goes back to having a relationship with an artist in order to understand even how commercial jewelry comes to be. It all started with an artist. It started in one person's hands. And that story is critical to the continuing growth and development of how jewelry is designed, how it is brought to fruition. And I love watching the collaborations right now between mining, cutting, artistry, finished piece. It's a beautiful, beautiful love story that's told from beginning to end.
And I love hearing that from you because so many of us just have like the one-sided the puzzle piece of that story, but we don't have the whole vision. And you're one of the few people that actually does get to see all of those aspects. And so we need you to come and tell us and remind us of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a blessing for sure. And I'm very fortunate that the owners of Somewhere in the Rainbow allow me to seek and to explore all of the different components. They don't tie my hands to, you know, only doing exhibitions or only doing talks or only collecting, whatever the case
One
is.
type of
They
thing.
really are very open to Somewhere in the Rainbow being an exploratory educational facility. And we've learned some things work better than others, but we never know if we don't explore it,
Yeah.
you know?
Last question for you before we close out.
Sure.
Who would you like to nominate I interview next? I know you can probably give me a list, and I will take that list.
Who would I nominate? I always believe in going back in time and then telling a story forward. Boy, you put me on the spot with this one because I think it depends on the arena that we're talking about. If I were thinking of a gem cutter, I would think of potentially Jeff Hapeman or Daryl Alexander. If I were thinking of a designer, I would be thinking of a Zoltan David, Susan Helmich, a Vic Valian, like that list just goes on and on and on. Adam Neely. Adam is just doing amazing, amazing things right now. But I think that the Adam story is more relevant today if you hear from some of his contemporaries, right? Robert Weldon, my gosh, what a fantastic interview. This is a man who's got editorial and pictorial history going back 40 years that, learned it by getting dropped in the bush in Africa with Campbell Bridges and being introduced to the world of Africa. If I were talking about a gem dealer, I would think somebody like a Bruce Bridges or the Romanella brothers, or you've talked with Kim Collins, right?
I have, yes.
Yeah, or somebody, the even, Simon and Watt, who, they've got a whole nother generation that's coming behind them, and Jeffrey. That list could just go on and on. If you want to talk about a strong female, you go to Erica Courtney or Paula Crevichet, Brenda Smith, who came into this industry much later in life and has now won numerous AJDC and AGTA awards. So you're asking me the impossible question because
I
I'm
know.
so fortunate to be surrounded by amazing people. Like all
Yeah.
of them are amazing. But if you said to me you can only pick one, I would choose Robert Weldon because from that interview, it will branch you out into 100 more.
Okay, that's really cool.
And I love that.
Absolutely, I will. And something else that you mentioned before we started recording was how these interviews are little time capsules or just preserving capsules at large. And I just have to say that I lament that I didn't start this project before Mr. Moonsteiner passed away. I would have loved to have interviewed him, and I got to speak to his son when he came out last year to Hard Rock Summit in Denver. But oh, that's something that I think about now that, I wanna talk to these people, these amazing, amazing artists and pioneers in their discipline before they're no longer here.
Yeah, or even before they retire, one way or
Yeah.
the other. But no, you're right. And Philip Moonsteiner is the epitome of his grandfather, his father, and his mother.
Mm,
He has absorbed more talent, knowledge, insight, foresight, understanding of the discipline, not only of the gem cutting, but how it's going to relate to a piece of finished jewelry, than probably any other young artist that I can think of. He's truly remarkable because of his heritage and his desire to learn it.
yeah.
I remember his mom telling me that she used to, when he was a baby, she would put him in the stroller and every day they would go through the workshop. So he became so enamored with the smells and the sounds and the oils and the tools and the voices that he would grow up and not be able to be without it.
Cool.
And now
Yes.
it's just part of his DNA.
Absolutely. There's a richness there. And that's actually partly why I started the podcast was because I didn't necessarily grow up with that. I have a beautiful upbringing with a family of artists, but it wasn't jewelry centered. And so I'm in a way getting an inheritance from this project.
Yeah. And so are we. You're going to interview people that and I'm going to have the opportunity to see their podcasts and to see them in a light that I've never seen them before. I might find a new artist. I might learn something about an artist that we work with that I don't already know because you are bringing that oral history into all of our worlds. And it's so important. We hear it differently than we read it.
Mm,
We connect to seeing somebody's facial expressions and things on camera that you don't get to necessarily see in a book. You see the artist right in front of you. Oh, Bill Larson and Carl Larson. Oh my gosh, talk about a great interview. Now, and I'll say this because I would say this if Bill were sitting here, you're going to have to tell Carl that he can talk over his dad because Bill has so many stories and so much rich history, he'll never stop talking. But I mean, to have the two of them together, you're telling us you've got such a story. Burma
yeah.
Bill and Carl, like, amazing. Anyway, and that can go on, and it's
Thank
impossible.
you
It's
for saying
impossible for
that.
me to tell you that there's one that's better than the other. There's not. They're all fascinating.
Yeah.
So you could spend your whole life doing this.
I hope to do it for a long time because it's just blessed my life tenfold. So I started doing it for me, and it's been awesome that other people have loved it and tuned in. But I would honestly do it if there wasn't an audience, and that's the truth of it.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job and it's very important. The work that you're doing is really important. And through this, I'm sure that you're finding that it's enhancing you finding your voice through your work.
I'm working on it.
Good for
Stay
you.
tuned.
Good for you. Yes, keep doing it.
Thank you, Shelly. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
saying that, and thank you for coming on. I know your time is so valuable, so I
All of our
appreciate
time is
you.
valuable. My time is no more valuable than yours.
Well, either way, I just thank you for making time for this.
My
I look
pleasure.
forward to introducing you to a new group of people who maybe haven't met you yet, and this is such a privilege. So thank you.
Well, it's a privilege for me as well. And if you, when this becomes available, and for people who don't know me, I hope that they will find me, and I hope that there's something here that inspires them to find their voice and to believe in the educational component and how important that is, and how we continue to evolve as a community. Because at the end of the day, we're all part of the same community.
Yeah,
So thank
beautifully
you.
said.
Thank you so much for the beautiful invitation. You are a beautiful, beautiful hostess, my darling.
Thank you. Thank you. I try. I try. I look forward to it. Hopefully one day I can host you in my studio. You're always welcome. When you come
Thank
see
you. Well,
Susan, come see me.
the next time I come to Colorado, I will make a point to put that on my to-do list. It would
Love
be
to.
my pleasure. I love walking into an artist studio because you learn so much about them as soon as you cross the
Oh
threshold.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's just their own like fingerprint on a space. So
Yeah. You know, when you walk into my office, you see all kinds of projects and you see the messiest desk. Like to see me, you would think she's probably not so messy. Oh, my desk is a mess. But I can tell you where everything is. Like
there you go.
I can tell you where it's all hiding, but my assistant every day has to look and just shake her head at me and be like, Shelly, we just don't even understand you.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Nadia, thank you. Please give my best regards to everybody in Colorado. And everybody there is such, you're amongst such a gracious group of community people there. So please give my best to them. And I look forward to the next time I get to see you.
Yes. Hopefully Tucson.
Yes,
Probably.
for sure. For sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelly. Have
You
a great
bet.
rest of
Have
your
a good
day.
night.
That concludes this episode with the beautiful, wonderful, and talented Shelly. I've been looking forward to this episode ever since the genesis of this podcast. I always envisioned that she would be a guest here, and she's always a guest, both in my home, in my studio, and in my heart. I love seeing her any opportunity I get. If you have the opportunity to visit Arizona and see the Somewhere in the Rainbow collection, I believe it is on occasion on display in their museum in Tucson. And you can connect with Shelly on Somewhere in the Rainbow curation on Instagram. And again, Shelly, thank you so much for coming on. It is always a joy to connect with you. I look forward to knowing Shelly for all the rest of my years in the industry to come. So thank you again for listening. It's a joy and a pleasure to host this podcast. It's always my way of learning and connecting with people, but it's an added bonus that others are benefiting from it as well. So thank you again. I will see you next week for the next episode. Cheers.